it's Elena and I'm back with another video, and today I want to talk to you guys about reading techniques for university because about a month into law school I realized that the way I was doing my work just wasn't working. So don't get me wrong here, I was doing my work. So whenever I had an assignment and I had to read text, I would read them and then I would take notes in them and then I would try to, incorporate them in my essays and so on. Now the problem was that whenever I had a text that I had to read, I would get the text, read it once, take notes, and then I was done with it. And that technique just wasn't really working because when you're in university, you have to read a lot of academic writing, and very often those are journal articles or book chapters, and they can be anything from, 5 pages to 30 pages or longer. And when you read them just once, very often you just remember the things on the last few pages, but you don't actually, have a good idea of what the article was really about. And that's why I sometimes didn't even fully grasp the thesis, so the main argument of these texts, but rather I got stuck on tiny details that were mentioned on the last few pages, but that were actually pretty much irrelevant for my degree. So I went to a bookstore and I picked up a few books on studying law that were supposed to, teach you some study techniques for law school. And I actually found that really, really useful. And in hindsight, I wish I had read these books before law school because it really would have helped me. But oh well, at least I found them a month into law school and not a year into law school. And one thing that I took away from these books was a reading technique, because all that they had in common was that they were not recommending the reading technique that I was using for obvious reasons, because it's just not working. And here's the reading technique that I found really useful for law school, and I would highly recommend this for any academic writing that you're reading. I wouldn't really recommend this for case law, but I would definitely recommend it for academic writing, because academic writing tends to be written in a very similar structure. So you can really easily use this reading technique with any academic text that you have to read. So now I'm going to explain to you guys how that reading technique works, and I'm going to use an example paper in order to explain it. And I'm going to use the paper by Desta and Hirsch in the International and Comparative Law Quarterly. And it's called African Countries in a World Trading System, International Trade, Domestic Institutions, and the Role of International Law. It's a really interesting paper on how international trade standards can affect the economic growth of developing countries, and I would highly recommend reading it if anybody's interested. I'm going to have the full citation of the paper in the info box below if you're interested. And yeah, now we're going to get into the reading technique. So the first thing you're going to do is look at the title, which should already give you a bit of an idea of what could generally be discussed in this article, and then ask yourself, what do you want to get from this reading? What kind of information are you interested in? Are you interested in information about power, balance or imbalance in the international trading system? Are you interested in the international law aspect? Are you more interested in economic growth in developing countries? Are you maybe interested in only a specific country? Really think about what is it that interests you, because you usually don't read academic writing for fun. You may do that, but usually you're reading it for a particular purpose. So you don't need to get stuck on any details that aren't even relevant for what you're studying. So really think about that. And once you have your goal in mind, then read the introduction, go over all the titles, and read the conclusion. Because academic writing, unlike novels, gives away its main argument and ending right away in the introduction. They will tell you what they're arguing for, and then the entire paper is about that argument and defending and supporting it. So academic writing gives you the big conclusion right at the start. That's why when you read the introduction and the conclusion, you will already have a pretty good idea of what that paper is really about. So that's why read the introduction, and then just scroll through the paper, but read through all the headings and then read the conclusion. If it's a very long paper or it just has a lot of different sections, I would recommend taking a little piece of paper and just writing down the different headings of the sections, because this gives you a better overview of what is included in this paper, because the headings do give you an indication of what is discussed where. Also, very often in the introduction they will also tell you exactly what will be discussed in which section, so pay attention to that, because you may not have to read all the sections. And once you did that, then think about what part of this paper am I really interested in and what do I have to read from this. So now that you've done all that, you already know the main thesis of that paper because you've read the introduction and the conclusion. And I would recommend writing down that thesis and try to summarize it in one sentence. And when you can do that, you actually have grasped the thesis. Then you really understand this is the main point they're making. You may not understand all the tiny bitty details about it yet, but you do know this is the main argument. And that's really important, because If your teacher asks you, have you read this? Can you summarize this really quick? This is your summary, the thesis, and that's it. Because that is the main thing you take from any academic writing. Now, once you know that, you can actually dive into the details. And now look at your list of sections and ask yourself, are they all relevant for me? And it is very well possible that you don't need to read all of them. So when I was reading this paper, I was very interested in how animal rights law can affect countries' economic growth and whether therefore there's even a chance to support it on an international level at this point in time. But I wasn't very interested in, you know, the nitty-bitty details about economic models. So for example, the section that they call the new institutional economics approach to economic development, that was not very relevant to me. I was more interested in the actual facts, but I didn't need a lesson on economics because I wasn't writing an economics paper. So I could disregard the section and, you know, just move on. But if you're an economics student, this might be the one section of this paper that you're really interested in. So really make a conscious decision about what you're gonna read and what you're not gonna read. And by doing that, you only read what you actually need to read, and then it's so much easier to only get the main points and not get stuck on any details that you probably thought were interesting but might be really irrelevant to your degree. So that way you have a good overview. So read those sections, and after you read a section, summarize your main takeaways in 1 to 2 sentences. Don't give yourself more than that, because anything that can't be put in 1 to 2 sentences is probably not part of the main argument of that section. And you have to really be strict about this with yourself, because at the end of the day, you are reading this paper in order to later on study it for your exam. And at the time you will study for your exams, you will have read hundreds of articles. And if you have a full page on every article, it's going to be really, really hard to study all of that for your exams. So you can't do that. So that's why you should really try to summarize it in as little sentences as you can in order to really ensure that you only put the key takeaways in it. And I actually found that this technique saved me a lot of time, which really surprised me, because when I first read about it in these books that I bought, I was like, oh god, this is gonna cost me a lot of time. Because, you know, you have to first of all ask yourself, what do you want from this article? Then, you know, go through the entire paper but just looking at the subheadings and stuff. And I was like, well, that's probably me wasting my time. But actually no, it's me making use of my time, because by deciding what I'm gonna read and what I'm not gonna read, I've probably saved myself hundreds of pages of reading that really I wouldn't have needed anyway. As I said, I wouldn't really recommend this strategy for case law, because cases tend to be structured a little bit differently than academic writing, but it definitely works with academic writings, whether it's a journal article or a book chapter. It has helped me so much. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye!